Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the First Universalist Church of Yarmouth. My name is Joanna Landsman. I'm a member of the board and the worship council here at First U, and I'm so happy to be greeting you this morning. At First Universalist, our mission is to explore our faith, embrace this community, and to engage the world as spiritual seekers. May we take those words to heart. This morning, while Reverend Hillary is participating in a UU Ministers Association retreat, we welcome guest minister Reverend Paul Langston-Daley into our pulpit. Reverend Paul was ordained as a Unitarian Universalist minister in 1997 and has served congregations large and small as settled, interim, and consulting minister in 6 states. He holds a master's degree in restorative practices and youth counseling from the International Institute for Restorative Practices and is currently serving as social justice manager for the First Parish in Concord, Mass. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before our service begins this morning, I have a couple of really brief announcements. First, just a reminder that we will be back in person in the sanctuary next Sunday, but also rest assured, we'll of course continue to offer the service simultaneously on Zoom. Meanwhile, speaking of Zoom, there will be a time of fellowship after today's service right here in the same Zoom room. So if you're able, you're invited to stick around to chat a bit before heading off into the rest of your Sunday. And finally, I just wanted to spotlight Channels, our weekly newsletter. It's always chock full of information about the goings-on at First U and in the wider community. And one thing I always look forward to each Friday morning is reading Reverend Hillary's minister's message. It's just one of the many things I appreciate about her. So those are our announcements this morning. I invite you now to take a deep breath with me and settle into this time and space together. Sam Chandler, our music director, will play us into worship.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This morning, I welcome you all with these words. The prophet Jeremiah states, "Seek the welfare of the city in which you live. Pray for it and work for it, for in the city's welfare, you will find your own welfare." Our welfare and the welfare of our neighbors are joined in a common fate. We gather today to recognize this simple truth. The power of love is the strongest saving power in the world. As Arnold Toynbee states, love is the ultimate force that makes for the saving choice of life and good against the damning choice of death and evil. Therefore, the first hope in our inventory must be that love is going to have the last word. We gather today in love, recognizing the profound power that emanates from such love. We gather to bring the power of love into being and to act from it. For in the welfare of the city lies our own welfare. Welcome, and I invite you to join in singing our first hymn, Circle Round for Freedom.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
I invite you now to join in the unison affirmation of this congregation. We are united in seeking to increase love with justice and to constitute a free church open to all people. Mindful of our past and drawing upon modern knowledge, we respond to the spiritual needs of persons and are devoted to the common good in community, nation, and world. We cherish the integrity of each individual and search for a truth with reason as our guide. We respect differences of opinion and strive to be a democratic community. We are concerned with this world and open to the future. We light our chalice this morning in peace and friendship. And I invite Gwen and Mac to bring our story and time of all ages.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Good morning, Gwen.
Good morning, Mac. I'm so excited today
Why are you excited?
because I have a Wonder Box.
A wonder box? What is that?
Well, it's just what it sounds like. It's a box full of wonder. And well, also it's a box where we can wonder what's inside of it.
Well, I do wonder what's inside. I can't wait. Let's open it up.
Okay, here we go. Isn't it wonderful?
Okay, that doesn't look like too much. What is it?
It is a wonderful, fantastic bulb.
Like a light bulb?
No, it's a flower bulb. Specifically, this is a crocus bulb, one of the first flowers to start growing in the spring. Sometimes these little crocus bulbs even start sending green leaves up through the snow.
Oh, okay, that is pretty wonderful and fantastic, but why was that crocus bulb inside your wonder box?
Because today is the first day of spring.
Oh, yes, I'd forgotten. The first day of spring. Woohoo! And you know what else? That means it's also the spring or vernal equinox, and also the holiday known as Ostara.
Whoa, that's so cool. I didn't know today had so many special names. First day of spring, spring or vernal equinox, and Ostara. Why do you think this one day has so many names?
I think it might be because when winter is ending, people get really excited about spring.
Yeah, I think so too. Hey, Mac, can you quickly explain to me what an equinox is again?
Sure, equinox basically means equal. It's a time of year when we have equal parts day and night. So 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime. And this happens twice per year, once in the spring and once in the fall. Now, can I ask you to explain something to me?
Of course.
Can you quickly explain to me what the holiday of Ostara is?
Okay, sure thing. I know this one. Ostara is a pagan or a Wiccan holiday that celebrates the goddess named Ostra. The goddess Ostra represents spring and new beginnings, and the holiday of Ostara itself also symbolizes rebirth and renewal. And a lot of our Easter traditions come from this holiday.
Huh, rebirth and renewal. I wonder why this time of year is all about rebirth and renewal.
Well, okay, good question. So I think maybe it's because of a lot of things that were sleeping over the winter, like plants that go dormant or animals that hibernate, they start to wake up right about now. Things like this crocus bulb right here start to sprout and grow.
Yeah, and that makes me think that maybe it's also about all the animals who are making new nests or building new homes to have new babies in the spring.
You know what it makes me wonder though, like our wonder box, how is spring a time of rebirth and renewal for people? We don't sleep all winter and we don't necessarily build new houses or have new babies in the spring.
Well, even as people, we can appreciate the renewal we see all around us in the natural world. Even when sometimes we feel a little detached from it, we're still connected to the planet and all other beings.
That's true. So maybe even if we don't wake up from dormancy or build nests this time of year, there's something inside of us that still feels connected to the plants and animals that are waking up or building something new and creating new life.
Yeah, and it's a special gift too to have a chance to think about renewal. We can use this time of year to think about what thoughts or attitudes we have that might be dusty and need to be refreshed.
I've never thought of that before, Mac, but we can use springtime as a reminder to ourselves to renew our spiritual life, renew our faith, renew our connection to our community and each other.
You know what helps me remind myself of our connection to our community and each other every week? Our children's blessing. Let's say it together now.
Okay.
We are Unitarian Universalists,
people of open minds, loving
loving
hearts,
hearts,
and
and
helping
helping
hands.
hands.
Oh, Gwen and Mac, I love your time for all ages every week. It's just fabulous. But now,
She writes, Holy God, hear our prayer. There is pain and there is sorrow. There are broken relationships and broken hearts. Sometimes we are the cause of those things. We have caused pain. We have broken the relationship. Sometimes we are simply part of them. We are the ones who suffer. We are the ones who are broken. So we ask your forgiveness and we ask for your healing. Beyond that, we ask that you would help us turn from our former selves to the persons that you have created us to be, full of mercy and grace and love. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
amen. As our justice focus shifts to climate change, we embrace think globally, act locally. And therefore, we lift up the work of area land trusts who are weaving together corridors of conserved land and recognize that our natural world, with the wondrous capabilities of trees, is the best thing we have right now to fight climate change. This week's half plate is for our local Royal River Conservation Trust, expanding preserved networks, offering nature walks for exploration, learning, growth, and nourishment of the soul. You're invited to make your offering today using the donate button in the order of worship. By clicking this link, you'll be taken to Give Butter, a virtual giving site that accepts a card number, PayPal, and Venmo accounts. You may also give your offering by dropping a check in the mail or by using your bank's free bill pay feature. This morning's offering has been requested and will be gratefully received. Thank you.
Just a note here, I'm changing the offertory today to Joy Spring by Clifford Brown.
Yay. Thank you. Our reading this morning is entitled The Opposite of Injustice is Compassion by Charlotte Joko Beck. Charlotte was a Buddhist teacher and author. And in this essay, she speaks about justice from a Buddhist perspective, and particularly from those practicing Buddhists, and the work of meditation and Buddhist practice. She writes, as we become increasingly sensitive to ourselves and the transitory experience of our lives, our thoughts, emotions, sensations, it becomes obvious to us that the underlying stratus of our lives is anger. When someone insists, I'm never angry, I am incredulous, since anger and its subsets, depression, resentment, jealousy, backbiting, gossip, and so on, dominate our lives. We need to investigate the whole problem of anger with care. For a life free of anger would be the promised land of milk and honey, nirvana, an existence in which our own worth and that of others is a blessedly confirmed reality. For the psychologically mature person, the ills and injustices of life are handled by counter-aggression, in which one makes an effort to eliminate the injustice and create justice. Often such efforts are dictatorial, full of anger and self-righteousness. In spiritual maturity, the opposite of injustice is not justice, but compassion. Not me against you, not me straightening out the present ill, fighting to gain a just result for myself and others, but compassion, a life that goes against nothing and fulfills everything. All anger is based on judgments, whether of ourselves or others. The best answer to injustice is not justice, but compassion or love. You ask, but what am I to do in this difficult situation? I must do something. Yes, but what? Always, our practice must be the basis for our actions. An appropriate and compassionate response does not come from a fight for justice, but from the radical dimension of practice that passeth all understanding. It's not easy. Perhaps we must go through agonized weeks or months of sitting, but the resolution will come. No person can provide this resolution for us. It can be provided only by our true self if we open wide the gates of practice. Let us not adopt some facile, narrowly psychological view of our lives. The radical dimension I speak of demands everything we have and are. Joy, not happiness, is its fruit. Herein ends our reading. So it's good to be here among you today. I speak to you from the lands along the Acushnet River, the lands originally of the Pocasets, in an area we call New Bedford, Massachusetts. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you this morning. As I think about our history as Unitarian Universalists, I recognize it is steeped in social justice, grounded in relationships and the care for life. For generations, we have worked for the human and civil rights of the marginalized and the dispossessed. One such area is that of the criminal justice system. UUs have advocated for prison reform and rehabilitation for decades, especially given the biased and racist nature of our prison industrial complex in these days. What we know about our current criminal justice system is that it is fundamentally broken. Private prisons still exist, designed to generate cheap labor for businesses, and more importantly, shares for its investors. These have pushed an agenda that have encouraged incarceration for even minor crimes. And our prisons have been incubators for COVID-19, and little has been done to care for those inside, both those imprisoned and those who work with them. The inherent racism in the system is clear for all who have eyes to see and ears to hear. But some may still approach those in prison with an attitude of, well, they deserved what happened to them. They broke the law. They knew the consequences and should have made different choices. I invite you to think about that for just a minute and to think about your own history as a youth. I bet some of you behaved in ways that today could get you arrested. Or consider any of the millions of little things that people of color are harassed and arrested for each day. We should be critical when we hear about long rap sheets as Black and brown people are targeted from a young age and minor infractions, constantly noted and marked, add up in ways that are not always just or true. And youth in particular do not have the impulse control that is learned over time with experience. Their brains are literally still developing. And our punitive model has sentences for youth increasing along with the number of youth tried as adults. So what is an alternative to prisons? How can we bring our system back into balance? Can we have faith in one another? I think first we must acknowledge that there are people who may never be redeemed in this life, people who are so profoundly broken that the only solution is to keep them separated from the rest of society, people who will never be able to participate in society no matter how much work is done to help them heal. And they are a very small minority. But what about the vast majority who are not profoundly broken? The people who are misguided or desperate, or those people who are targeted, or maybe even those looking for an easier, softer way. And I ask, who among us have not sought an easier, softer way at some time in our lives? Well, one alternative is restorative practices. And I'd like to invite you to consider this alternative. These circle practices originated in and have been used by Indigenous people for generations to resolve conflict and maintain peace, notably in Canada and Ontario province, and in New Zealand among the Maori people. These practices are foundational, relational. The first Western use of what we now call restorative practices was in Canada in the 1970s. It was called the Kitchener experiment. Now, the story is that several teens went out on a drinking spree and vandalized 22 properties. 2 adults involved in the case within the criminal justice system were connected to the Mennonite Church, and they felt this might be an opportunity to put their faith into action in the real world, a way to offer an alternative to a system to them that felt harsh and unbalanced. So these 2 adults contacted all of the property owners who suffered the vandalism from the spree, and 20 of the 22 agreed to meet face to face with the boys. As they listened, the boys learned the impact of their action, the fear and pain that they caused, the trepidation, the concern. And they also kept a financial record of the damage they had caused. They eventually returned to each home with an apology and a check for replacement or repair. These boys learned a valuable lesson. They learned that their actions had impacts on others, and they repaired the damage to the best of their ability and were welcomed and embraced back into their community in supportive and caring ways. The success of this experiment led the Mennonites to continue this work, and by the 1980s, Howard Zehr had defined some major differences between the criminal justice system and what he called restorative justice. Restorative justice takes a different approach to crime and to social relationship. It acknowledges and uses the truth that at its core, society is created by relationships. Now, these practices are countercultural in America. They're about taking time to build and repair relationships. They are not transactional, but instead call us, as Jewish theologian Martin Buber described, into I-thou relationships, to recognize the sacred, the holy, the divine, the inherent worth and dignity of each and all. So if we compare these two views, restorative justice and criminal justice, restorative justice believes that crime is a violation of people and relationships, not a violation of the law and the state. As such, crime leads to obligations rather than guilt, as we saw with the young men from the Kitchener experiment. They felt obligated to repair the damage they had done after speaking with the people. In this case, justice involves all parties, the victim, the offender, the members of the community or stakeholders, all of them in an effort to repair the harm and make things right. The two adults, the families that were harmed, and the youth came together to understand what happened and how to prevent it from happening again. In contrast, the criminal justice system requires the state to determine blame and to impose punishment. The boys did it, and they must be punished for it. The only parties necessary in the criminal justice system are the offender and the state. The families have no contact or connection, no opportunity to interact or to ask questions. So the central focus in the criminal justice system is offenders or criminals getting what they deserve. And for the offender, a focus on getting away with it if they can. In restorative justice, the central focus is on the needs of the victim and the offender's responsibility for repairing the harm. Those whose property was damaged were given the opportunity to confront the boys, to talk about what it felt like to them. And the boys were given the opportunity to accept responsibility for their actions, to hear about the fear and pain their actions caused, and to try to set it right. In short, these two models offer different questions. Criminal justice asks, what law has been broken? Who did it? What do they deserve? While restorative justice asks, who has been harmed? What are their needs? And whose obligations are these needs to repair? Restorative justice is not an easier, softer way. It holds people accountable for their behavior and asks them to repent and accept responsibility, to ask for and accept forgiveness. I say again, these practices are countercultural. They're about taking time that our culture doesn't really want us to do to build and repair I-thou relationships, to recognize that sacred, that holy, that divine in each and every one of us. Now, it's possible to use these practices in everyday situations, at home, at church, with family, anywhere. And one of the tools that any of us can use when we're facing a conflict or a difficult situation is to stop and take a deep breath and to ask a few basic questions that help focus on who has been harmed, what they need, and how that harm might be repaired. But we have to slow down and invest in our relationships by listening. These questions are fairly simple, and I'll give them to you now, and maybe I can drop them in the chat too. The questions are, what happened? That's the first question. So you ask all parties involved, tell us what happened. And we listen to that story. And then we ask, what were you thinking at the time that this event happened? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected by what happened here? Or for the person who was harmed, how were you affected by what happened here? And the final question, what needs to happen to move us forward, to make things as right as possible? These questions offer us an opportunity to step away from shaming and blaming, because that's part of our cultural norm, is to blame and to shame others. But when we ask these questions, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What do you think now? In what ways were you or other people harmed? And what do we need to do to move forward? These questions move us away from shaming and blaming and into that relational space where we can attend and listen to one another. All human beings are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food and shelter and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. And when we engage in these countercultural practices, when we take the time to build relationships that are not transactional, but instead call us into those relationships where we recognize that sacred, we change the way we interact, and we change the way our culture fundamentally responds to pain and harm. In a world fraught with conflict and polarization, in communities fighting to break the school to prison pipeline, in all the ways that matter, let us take time to recognize one another as souls on the journey together. Let us place relationships and the sacredness of all life at the center. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. And I invite you now to join us in singing hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good, to make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use and build a common good, and make our own days glad.
Our closing words are by the author Octavia Butler. She writes, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And I invite you now to join us in the unison benediction. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. For those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it, step by step.